Now, as we saw in part 1, evolutionists like Richard Dawkins, for very good reasons, don't debate evolution with the top creationist scientists.
Niles Eldredge talks about these debates, and he has debated a number of times. I debated him in Orlando, Florida. He is curator of the American Museum of Natural History, professor at Columbia. And he says, creationists today, at least the majority of their spokesmen, are highly educated, intelligent people. Skilled debaters, they have always done their homework, and they nearly always seem better informed than their opponents, who are reduced too often to a bewildered state of incoherence. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. He says creationists travel all over the United States, visiting college campuses, staging debates with biologists and geologists and anthropologists. The creationists nearly always win.
However, Dawkins did conduct a television interview with a Christian creationist woman who has no scientific training. He wanted to demonstrate how stupid and scientifically blind these creationists are for rejecting evolution.
What you find is a beautifully arranged hierarchy. You find that our DNA is close to chimpanzees, slightly more distant from monkeys, slightly more distant still from rats, slightly more distant still from lizards. The whole thing falls into a beautiful hierarchical pattern, just like a family tree. It is a family tree. How would you explain that?
Well, no one needs to explain that, because I'm going to quote two highly qualified evolutionary biologists. The first one, a French expert, says, "We have no evidence at all that the tree of life is a reality." The second one, Professor Michael Rose from California, said, "The tree of life is being politely buried." Do your homework, Dawkins. So take any complex phenomenon in the living world. For example, the human liver, which performs some 200 different functions. All these functions, whether it's those that we inherited from our animal ancestors and were upgraded, or those that evolved for the unique purposes of human beings, all of them are the result of genetic changes preserved by natural selection. Isn't that amazing? Miraculous. Well, actually, no. Scholars like Richard Dawkins inform us that to believe in miracles is silly. This is science. There are two different theories regarding the ancestry of birds. One is that they evolved from theropod dinosaurs. Other experts say that this is totally impossible and that they evolved from some small crocodile-like creature that lived in trees. Either way, reptile scales turned into feathers, the feathers turned into wings, and these newly evolved birds learned how to fly. Evolution, says Richard Dawkins, enables us to be intellectually fulfilled atheists. If you were to say that dogs evolved from, let's say, rabbits, that's something else. That's brand new, complex features that require a mind-boggling amount of brand new genetic information. That's evolution. Now, the genetic information by itself is totally useless. There must have been from the outset a mechanism for retrieving the specific information required in order to produce each and every protein. It's like you come into this big library and in a second you take out the exact book you require and open it up at the right page. Then there must be a mechanism for translating, for decoding the information. Only then can the process of producing the protein actually commence. Do you know there are in our genes repair mechanisms and proofreaders? How would an evolutionist explain this? Did genetic mutations produce mechanisms for preventing and repairing genetic mutations? Richard Dawkins would say it doesn't matter if we don't understand. To say that God did it would be a cowardly evasion of scientific responsibility. What's cowardly? If I see a watch, I know there was a watchmaker. I'm not an idiot. So my recommendation to the evolutionists is go back to the drawing boards, chaps, and think this over. And while you're there, maybe you could come up with a scientific explanation as to how some species of whales developed a sonar system. The ability to emit sound waves that bounce off objects, the echoes return to the whales, and they are thereby capable of locating the position and calculating the size of fish for prey at a distance of some 50 meters. Because this was not the result of genetic mutations and natural selection or genetic drift or horizontal gene transfer. These things do not produce irreducibly complex systems that are more sophisticated than anything modern technology can invent. So until you come up with a scientific explanation as to how a whale became a whale, and how a bee became a bee, and how a bird became a bird, and how a heart became a heart, please spare us all this wild speculation. Spare us all this propaganda and misinformation, and spare society, especially school children, all this outrageous indoctrination.
Gravity is not a version of the truth, it is the truth. Anybody who doubts it is invited to jump out of a 10th floor window. Evolution, too, is reality. You don't decide whether to believe it or not believe it on the basis of whim or culture. The evidence supports it. Evolution is the plain truth.
Now, the irrefutable fact of God's existence does not automatically have any spiritual or religious ramifications, and it's beyond the scope of these talks to address such burning issues as, did God create us, as it were, just for the fun of it, or is there some deeper purpose and meaning to our lives? And if there is some ultimate spiritual and religious truth, can its authenticity in any way be verified, or is all religion, just like atheism, entirely a matter of faith? However, just one afterthought for those of you who may have been influenced by the teachings of the zealous, wise men of New Atheism. Since their whole atheistic philosophy is based not on science, but at best on second-rate science fiction coupled with a fanatic faith in randomness, how can they be granted the slightest credibility when they are talking about theology, the Hebrew Bible, spirituality? That's all for now. Thank you and shalom.